Okay, hello there. I was in town today on my lunch break at work and I got handed out this book. It's called The Wee Blue Book, The Facts the Papers Leave Out. It's to do with the Scottish referendum, and I thought that I would read it to you, not all in the one go, but I thought I would read it to you piece by piece, maybe one each day, and it would maybe help inform us all about the situation and what's going on, and give us more information to make a more informed decision when it comes to voting, and why not. So it's called The Wee Blue Book. It is being given out by a company called Wings Over Scotland, if you can see that there. So it's always important when you get these things to know who they're from, what their agenda is and things like that. So I mean, let's see what it says then. Okay, on the inside we've got a quote, and it says, on 18th of September 2014, between the hours of 7 AM and 10 PM, absolute sovereign power will lie in the hands of the Scottish people. They have to decide whether to keep it or give it away to where the minority status makes them permanently powerless and vulnerable. And that's a quote from Jim Sillars, a former Labour MP, founder of the Scottish Labour Party and a former SNP Member of Parliament. Okay, so let's have a read of the introduction today, and I will also read you chapter 1 called Principles and Politics. So let's see. Scotland is served by over 37 national or daily newspapers. Not one supports independence. The only publication to back a yes vote is a weekly, the Sunday Herald. Newspapers have no duty to be fair or balanced, but when Scotland faces a decision as big as the one it will make on September 18th, the press being so overwhelmingly skewed to one side is a problem for democracy. Yeah, you want a more balanced and informed opinion, don't you? Okay, so our website, Wings Over Scotland, is biased too. Okay, so they're admitting that from the start, they're biased, okay? We support independence because we think it will make Scotland a wealthier, fairer, happier place. We think Scotland will be better off choosing its own governments to solve its problems and make the most of its opportunities, rather than having the people of Kent, Surrey and Essex rather than hoping that the people of Kent, Surrey and Essex might elect ones with Scotland's interests at heart. Okay. We think the facts comprehensively back up that belief, but we're not going to ask you to take our word for it. Okay, so that's good. They're not going to ask you to take their word for it, so hopefully they're going to give you some nice reliable sources you can go and check up for yourself. A great deal of what you've been told about independence in the last few years by unionist politicians and the media is, to be blunt, a tissue of half-truths, omissions, misrepresentations and flat-out lies. We want to show you the truth hidden behind those lies, but using fully referenced, using fully referenced and impartial sources that you can go and check for yourself. Okay, so right, you see what their agenda is from the start. Okay, this is clearly coming from the yes side of the campaign, and it is using, a few words to, like, half-truths, omissions and misrepresentations to make you perceive the no campaign in that way. Okay, so it's important to pick up on that from the start. It's important to pick up on what they're saying, and try and, when it says things like that, I guess almost remove them from your judgment until you remove those words from skewing your judgment until you've actually heard what they've got to say about the facts and from the sources, as it were. So we'll be mostly using the UK government's own figures, the views of academic experts and unionist politicians and officials, not those who support independence. Okay, so that's good then. So they're going to be using the UK government's own figures. On September the 18th, you're going to have to make a most important decision any Scot has made in history, and it seems only fair that you should be able to do it based on the real and full facts. Scotland's media has only told you one half of the story. Don't you at least want to hear both sides before you decide? And that is from Reverend, I think it is, Stuart Campbell, the editor of Wings Over Scotland. So, the case for independence in 5 points. This book has been designed to take no more than a couple of hours to read. We'll be making our arguments in detail with lots of sources and reference, but the basic case for independence is a lot simpler than that, and it boils down to just 5 key points. Okay, remember, this is just still the introduction. I'm not going to read you it all in the one go. I'm going to break it up into nice, digestible segments for you, do you know what I mean? So, Scotland is a country, and like any other country, it deserves to get the government it votes for. As part of the UK, that happens well under half of the time. We don't affect the outcome of UK elections, so the rest of the UK doesn't need our help. So why keep subjecting ourselves to governments we rejected at the ballot box? Okay. 2. Scotland will be wealthier as an independent country than it will inside the UK, even before you discuss possible savings from policy changes, like more sensible defence spending. Scotland subsidises the UK by billions of pounds every year, according to Westminster's own figures. The longer we stay in the UK, the poorer we'll get. You'll never get a UK government minister or a no-campaign figure to actually say straight out that Scotland is subsidised by the rest of the UK. Give it a try if you like. Instead, they'll try to confuse the matter and change the subject by talking about things like spending and debt. See the questions section of chapter 2, in order to make you believe it's true without having to directly lie to you. Think about it this way. If Scotland was actually being subsidised by the rest of the UK, do you think the no camp would be shouting that fact from the rooftops every minute of the day? Maybe. Don't know. Point 3. Scotland's future is bright. Oil will last for decades yet, and we sit on the brink of renewables bounty that could make the entire historic output of the North Sea pale into insignificance. But the UK can't be trusted to manage it. Scotland is the only country in the world ever to discover oil and get poorer. Scotland is the only country in the world ever to discover oil and get poorer. That's a hefty claim. And unlike almost every other oil-rich nation, Westminster put nothing aside for a rainy day. Now they're referring to oil funds, which other countries like Norway have set up. It also hid Scotland's wealth from its people for 30 years. Point 4. We have nothing to fear but fear itself. Threats that Scotland will be ejected, even temporarily, from the EU are hollow, impossible to ever put into practice. The same applies to border controls. Nobody can stop us from using the pound. The country poses a military threat to Scotland, and the only reason terrorists might attack us is because we're part of the UK. We will still get to watch the BBC. Point 5. People are sensible. At the moment, the No campaign has a vested interest in making things sound like they'd be as difficult as possible for an independent Scotland. But the day after a yes vote, the opposite instantly becomes true. It's then in everyone's interest to sort everything out as quickly and cleanly as possible. If you accept that the EU would want Scotland as a member, and it would, then nobody gains from making that process slow and complicated and awkward. If you accept that the UK and an independent Scotland would still be major trading partners and allies, which they would, then nobody gains from a hostile, drawn-out negotiation process. All parties will seek the best deal, of course, but businesses and people alike want life to continue with as little disruption and upheaval as humanly possible. Nobody wins from a negative approach, and no government will cut its nose off to spite its face. Okay, so that's all 5 points made. Okay, that's the end of the introduction. My dinner's almost ready, so I'm going to call that video there, and we'll call that introduction to the Wee Blue Book, the facts that the papers leave out, and look out for the next video where we'll be discussing or reading from Principles and Politics.